As an American Jew, how can you continue to condone the actions of the Israeli government?
I want to correct you. I don't just condone the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government. I celebrate and laud them.
A lot of people don't know this, but I actually used to work with Ben Shapiro in the early days of the Andrew Breitbart websites. We both worked for Andrew Breitbart back in the sort of 2010, 2011 era, before he started his podcast, before I started my radio career and my streaming career. We're friends, and we've known each other for a long time. And yes, it's a joke that Ben Shapiro always likes to mention that he went to Harvard. He went to Harvard, right? I went to Harvard. Everyone said they went to Harvard. I went to Harvard. What people don't know is that he went to Harvard for law school. You know where he went to undergrad? That would be UCLA. UCLA, which was right in the neighborhood of Andrew Breitbart's home. Andrew Breitbart lived in Westwood, California as well, right like around the corner from UCLA. And so we used to go to coffee at the Pete's Coffee over there in Westwood a lot, Ben and I would. And of course, since his time with me at Breitbart and then starting his podcast, he's made a name for himself, not just with his great media presence and his media empire he's built with Daily Wire, but also for his frequent appearances on college campuses. That's really where the Ben Shapiro thing started to grow. And one of his first early appearances was at his alma mater at UCLA. That's why yesterday was such an important day for Ben Shapiro, for Young America's Foundation, the great organization that I do a lot of work with that sponsors his and presents his speeches at college campuses, but also for UCLA itself, because yesterday was the triumphant return of Ben Shapiro to the Westwood campus of the Bruins. And it was important also because we're less than a year after the horrific, disgusting, despicable, dirtbag, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, Jew-hating protests that took over the UCLA campus. You'll remember they camped out there. They had tents. They wouldn't let Jewish students cross campus or enter certain buildings because they're so hateful, so anti-Semitic, and were carrying the water for Hamas terrorists. All of that made for the perfect storm last night of Ben Shapiro's return. And true to form, like Young America's Foundation always does when people give presentations either at college campuses or at their locations in Washington, D.C. or Santa Barbara at the Reagan Ranch, the speaker, the featured speaker, gives an address for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then they open up the microphone to take questions. And Ben Shapiro is better than anyone at taking these questions. And he got a question that I suspect he was waiting for from one of those very same students who support Hamas. Watch this. Watch Ben Shapiro, the master at work.
As an American Jew, how can you continue to condone the actions of the Israeli government, condoned by the U.S. government, in the Gaza Strip, where over 40,000 people have died, including Palestinians and Israelis, and large numbers of children and civilians? How can you continue to condone those actions?
Okay, hold on. I want to correct you. I don't just condone the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government. I celebrate and laud them. I'm not morally apathetic about what's happening. On October 7th, Hamas launched the most deadly war on Jews since the Holocaust. They killed 1,200 innocent people. They took 250 hostages. 100 of them are still being held hostage. I know members of families of hostages who are still being held, American citizens. Hamas could end this war today by surrendering. They've chosen not to surrender. Instead, they spent billions of dollars building terror tunnels below civilian areas. It is not incumbent on the Israeli government to surrender just because terrorists are evil enough to hide behind civilians. The Israeli government has gone through such extraordinary efforts not to kill civilians that it has managed the best civilian to terrorist kill ratio in the history of urban warfare, and it is not close.
The social media platform that you're watching us on right now, it doesn't matter which one it is. I assure you that there are videos. It is replete with videos with headlines like Ben Shapiro destroys libtard questioner at college campus event, right? They're great. They're addictive. They're almost as fun to watch, those videos. They're almost as fun to watch as the election night coverage from 2016 when everybody melts down on the set of CNN and MSNBC and ABC. They're great. And I don't know about you, but I usually click from one to the other to the other. They're presented well. And there really is something cathartic to see Ben take one of these, sadly unintelligent but college educated kids who think they know everything and try to challenge conservative positions with their liberal orthodoxy and then end up in a heaping sweaty mess on the ground. It's fantastic. And that's why I love Ben, and that's why Ben is so great at it. But this one cuts a little deeper, because this isn't just about, economic policies or transgender agenda or gay marriage or abortion or... This is a guy who is actually criticizing a country for defending itself against evil, against slaughter, against rape, against attempted genocide. And by the way, Ben is ethnically and religiously one of those people who would be slaughtered if he were in Israel at that music festival, merely because of the accident of his birth and the decision of his religious affiliation. And this punk stands up there and tries to say, how can you support? And so to see Ben handle this in such a fierce way and keep himself in relative composure is just something incredible to watch, by the way. And let me just say, I think they finally presented him, Yaf has, with a correct podium and everything, because everybody always assumes that Ben Shapiro was like 5'8". Right? Everyone like 5'5". They all think he's very short. Ben is like 2 inches shorter than me. And for the first time at these events, he actually looks his actual proper height. I want to say he's 5'10", I think. I know his voice doesn't sound like it, but he's actually not short at all. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Personally know soldiers who have gone door to door in the Gaza Strip who have risked their own lives to prevent civilian death. Israel has complete and utter air superiority over the Gaza Strip. Turns out that Hamas doesn't have an air force. They just had a series of tunnels where they hid all their leadership while their people suffered after their people voted for them. And then they effectively established a dictatorship over the course of the last 20 years. Israel, with their complete air superiority, certainly would have had the ability to commit full-scale human atrocities had they wanted to. They have complete air superiority. They could have used F-35s and simply turned the place into a parking lot. They did not, in fact, do that. They moved vast scales of population. In fact, believe it or not, there have been more births in the Gaza Strip since the beginning of this war than there have been deaths in the Gaza Strip from the war itself. That is a very poor way to conduct a genocide.
By the way, I love that point so much, and I am going to be stealing it. How great. Have you seen that anywhere? But again, this is also an indictment of our media, that they are so in the tank and biased on behalf of the Hamas terrorists and the liberal left in this country. There have been more births in Gaza since October 7th than before. And as Ben brilliantly puts it, that's a terrible way to conduct a genocide. I love that. I'm stealing it. I'm using it all the time.
Israel is being more meticulous in the conduct of this war than any army in human history, and certainly than the United States Army in its vast role in the history of urban combat. That is uncontested. What is Israel supposed to do? Simply say that you get to play tag, you take Israeli citizens, you kill 1,200 people, you hide behind a baby, you hide behind a civilian, and now Israel has to preemptively surrender? That is a great way to make sure that terrorists always win. What Israel has done ought to be celebrated by the Western world, because they've demonstrated that if terrorists decide to launch a war they cannot win, they will be eviscerated from the face of the earth, as they ought to be.
Do you not want ceasefire now?
I do not want a ceasefire until Hamas is destroyed and all the hostages are back. I want... And you know how that could happen? It could have happened October 6th. There was a ceasefire on October 6th. And then there wasn't a ceasefire starting on October 7th. And there could have been a ceasefire again on October 8th, even after all of the death. If Hamas had surrendered its top leadership to international justice, if it had released all of its hostages, and if it had turned over its rulership of the Gaza Strip to some sort of decent body that wouldn't have reinstalled terrorism at the top of the food chain. I mean, what exactly is the excuse for Hezbollah getting involved in the war? Hezbollah isn't even in Israel. Hezbollah has nothing to do with Israeli territory, and they've been launching 8,000 rockets between October 7th and now. Now it's more like 12,000 or 13,000 rockets, hundreds of them every week. What is the justification for that? There's only one way to defeat terrorism, and that is to win. You do not win wars with ceasefires. You do not win wars by losing.
In your speech, you mentioned that there are scavengers who like to tear down and there are lions who like to build up. Are there not some institutions we ought to tear down in society, potentially like the Israeli Defense Force?
I want to at least give this kid credit for staying in there. I'm shocked. I assumed after that last one he would have walked away. But all right. I mean, I'm sure he's getting some sort of kudos from his little coffee clutch when he goes back and they all high five each other and get a matcha afterwards.
I think it would be an act of the gravest evil to even make that contention, simply because the Israeli Defense Force stands between 7.5 million Jews in Israel and complete slaughter. And by the way, over 2 million Arabs and complete slaughter who are citizens of the state of Israel. The only security and peace in the region right now is being guaranteed by the Israeli military. That is the only force standing between that region and continued chaos. The destruction of the IDF is the destruction of Israel. That means a genocide, a true genocide. The thing that everybody likes to ignore in the Middle East while they're claiming genocide and while they are claiming apartheid is that there's only one area in that specific area that is free of one ethnicity and religion, and it is quote unquote Palestine, which has 0 Jews living in it. If you drive through the West Bank, there are giant red signs if you drive into the Palestinian Authority areas saying Jews are not allowed in here. And if you drive there without the permission of the Israeli government as a Jew, you will be killed. If you're a Palestinian and you accidentally make your way into Israel, nothing will happen to you. You will go back to Nablus in the evening. If you make it through the checkpoint accidentally, you'll go back. And if you're a Jew and you accidentally drive into Ramallah, you will not emerge alive. That is not, if we are talking about which force here is a force for good and which force here is a force for evil, there is no question what the distinction is. If we're going to talk about institutions that ought to be torn down, we should start with the legacy media, which seems to have radically misinformed you.
Well, and frankly, the faculty at UCLA. God, I almost regret giving 4 years worth of tuition to that institution for my own daughter's education, but thankfully she didn't go to the international affairs or social sciences. She got a good degree that can actually be used for good in the world. She got a theater degree, the School of Film and Theater. And anyway, the point is, I'm very proud of Young America's Foundation for bringing Ben back to UCLA, and I'm proud to be a part of that organization. And boy, am I proud of my friend Ben Shapiro. I'm sure you guys are already subscribing to his feed and his show, but if you're not, what the hell is wrong with you? Get over there and subscribe to it, and let him know in the comments why you're there. And I don't know, maybe it's me, but I may have sold him short a little bit watching him finish up that incredible response. I think maybe he's more like 6'4" or 6'5". He's definitely growing in stature every single day.